Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast, episode 7. My name is Yuri and I'm joined by Keishi.
Hi Yuri, how are you today?
I'm good, Keishi, but today we are going to be talking about outsourcing. So, Keishi, what is outsourcing?
Yeah, so outsourcing just means that rather than doing some of the work that you're doing yourself, you just hire somebody else to do it, whether it's on a freelance basis or whether it's on a part-time basis or whether it's on a full-time basis. And I think when it comes to side hustles, generally it's on the kind of freelance basis. So you hire somebody to do some sort of task for you, some sort of job for you,
Hmm.
just so that you can free up your time.
Yeah, so essentially it's giving your work to someone else and paying them to do it. In other words, it's why can't someone else do it? And you pay them to do it so you can free up your time.
Exactly.
And we are talking about outsourcing because both of us in our own side hustles hire out freelancers to do work for us.
Yep, that's right.
The easiest example I can give is I can ask someone to write a language learning article, for example, how to say thank you in Russian or Ukrainian, and pass it off to someone on Fiverr or Upwork.com. They get it done, they send it back to me, I pay them money, and I post that up on my website, and there it is. It's mine, it's my content. That's an easy example of outsourcing.
So outsourcing can definitely free up your time, and it also has a bunch of other advantages and disadvantages as well. So why don't we talk about those for a while?
Yeah, so
So
like, what are the pros and cons of outsourcing?
yeah, so what do you think is the biggest pro of outsourcing? Why should people be even listening to this episode?
Oh, easy. It's because, long story short, someone else does the work for you and you pay them, which means you don't have to do the work and you have essentially, you have free time. You can,
Yeah, I'd
go
have to
ahead.
agree with that. I think as much as we like to think we're irreplaceable in many things, I think the truth is that the majority of tasks and things that we do on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of other people that can do them. And yeah, I think in many cases, it's whether you're looking to scale your business or whether you're looking to get started but you don't have the time, outsourcing can be a great way to free up some of your time and to actually get more stuff done.
Yeah, actually, that's the next road. Get more stuff done because if you're one person and you're putting out content, whether it's video or podcast, you're only one person. There's only so much you can do. But if you have like a team of say 5 writers, that's effort multiplied by 5.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually the main reason people should be outsourcing. One is to free up your time, but more than anything, I think it's to allow whatever it is that you're doing to scale. Like you said, if you hire 5 writers, then that means you can publish 5 times more article than you could if you were just writing yourself. Now, of course, you still have to do some management work and and some editing, perhaps if you don't outsource the editing part or create briefs and things like that.
Mm.
But if you're, let's say again, just to go back to the example of building a blog, and like you said, let's say building the language blog, then the longest chunk of time, the task that takes the most is the writing itself. So
Yes.
just by outsourcing that, you can ramp up your production and kind of speed up your growth that much
Yeah.
faster.
Just for reference, it would take me anywhere from like say 3 hours to 4 hours to do an article from beginning to end, and 4 hours is essentially half of someone's work day. And in other words, it's a long time. And if you could get a writer to do that for you while you go on and plan other things, that's good time spent in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just to kind of expand on what you were saying about being able to free up your time and about being able to scale what you're doing, I think there's also the other part, which at least in my case, just being able to outsource the things that I don't like to do.
Mm.
Of course, it frees up my time and it allows me to do more with less time, but also it just saves me so much frustration.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, like let's say I would have to copy paste briefs from one place into like a Google Doc and then add that Google Doc to a spreadsheet that the writer would then find and things like that. And then when I hired the assistant, then all I have to do is just create the brief in like the system that I use, and then the assistant goes in and he copies it and creates a document that he then adds to a spreadsheet. And all I have to do when assigning the articles to writers is just copy paste it from kind of the backlog spreadsheet into the individual writer's spreadsheet. So it just saves a lot of frustration about having to do things that don't necessarily require much brain power.
To go off of your point of scaling, if you ever want to have your side hustle grow into something much bigger than it is now, Ultimately, what you need is a lot of effort and a lot of content, things that push the needle, and that's where outsourcing can play a very important role. Otherwise, you're putting out like a blog or an article a week or so, once a week.
Yeah.
You can still grow, but the rate of growth will be very, very slow. But you can expedite that growth if you have a team of other people working for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just to kind of sum it up. I think it's what allows you to work on your business rather than in your business. So, like,
Yes.
if you
Yes.
imagine, like, if you spend 4 hours writing an article, that's one article that you output, and that's article that will probably make you money. But if you spend 4 hours preparing like the necessary procedures and job posting and stuff like that, this potential like unlimited number of articles that other people can write for you without you ever having to hit the keyboard.
This is what I had in mind actually. Article work is kind of busy work. Article work is kind of the trenches, in the trench work that needs to be done now, right? And it takes time. But if you could pass it off to someone else, you don't have to no longer work on the present, which is you need the articles. You can start working on the future, which is planning out more articles and more content and what to do with the content. So one way is like you need someone else to work on on the present so you can work on the future.
Exactly. I think that's a great way to put it. Now, so we talked about why it's good, and I think there's very little doubt that at one point or another, pretty much every single business or business owner should actually outsource a thing or two. But are there any cons? Is there anything that people should be aware of before they kind of jump right into it?
So cons. The first con I think is that it's not easy for a beginner to outsource because first and foremost it costs money. So if you just started a blog or a vlog and you're not earning any, then you have to either pay someone else to do it from your own pocket or you do it yourself.
I think this will vary for people in different situations because let's say there's somebody that's making whatever $10,000 in their day job, but they want to start something on the side. Then chances are they have more money than time. So they're probably better off spending some time figuring out how to outsource and how to get somebody else to build the site for them. Whereas if you're kind of living hand to mouth, if you don't have much spare cash from your day job or whatever, and you're just getting started with your side hustle, then you're probably better off just spending some extra time yourself and spending 2 hours in the evenings, 4 hours on the weekends, and things like that to kind of get it off the ground. And once you have some cash flow from the asset that you build, then you can start taking that money and reinvesting it back into the business by outsourcing it to other people.
I think another con I was thinking of, the saying you get what you pay for,
Yeah,
where if you don't pay too much, you get a subpar product, but if you pay a lot, you get an excellent product. I think it's kind of applicable, but it's also kind of inapplicable here. It's like you can pay for something really expensive, but still get a shoddy result, or you can get workers that have a much lower fee or a much lower rate.
yeah, I think that's right, and that's sort of what I had to kind of learn the hard way, where my expectations were like way above what I was willing to pay,
Hmm.
and then I kind of as I tried and failed and tried and failed like many times. Like one thing I realized is that what you're saying is true, and you definitely can't expect like a $10,000 worth of work by paying somebody $4,000, right? Let's say, but at the same time, I think the other part of the equation is like um, how good do you prepare the instructions?
Yeah,
And I think for many tasks, as long as the instructions are really good, then you can hire somebody that's, let's say, cheaper than kind of the top performer in the field, and yet they can still produce a result that's more than satisfying for what you need. That's good enough.
yeah.
So I think yeah, in general, definitely, you get what you pay for. But I think with a bit of looking around for the right people and even more time spent kind of preparing the right instructions and the right processes, that's something that can probably be largely overcome to some extent at
I wanted
most.
to bring up one point of I'm not sure if it's a con of outsourcing because it's not really a con, it's more of a learning curve, meaning when you are ready to outsource, just because you are ready doesn't mean you'll be a good manager, that your instructions will be good. So to that point, you might be releasing some really bad requests to freelancers that will be frustrated and won't understand what you're requesting. So the whole point is that you should probably learn how to outsource and manage and communicate. Not a con, but like something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there's at least in my case, there was a huge learning curve in being able to even get like the first kind of satisfying result especially I think out of like writers and kind of fields where the result is more subjective. So I've been working with a programmer on kind of like helping me with a bunch of different stuff on my websites for a couple of years now, and that was really smooth because like you say you want this and you get that, and it's really easy, right? Because the results kind of very specific.
Yeah.
But if it's something that's like writing where like everybody writes in a different way and like the odds of somebody writing the exact same sentence as you would write are essentially non-existent, I think that's where it gets really hard because you kind of have to let your ego go or kind of let your standards go in a way
Yeah.
and kind of learn to accept that not everybody's going to write in the same style as you write or kind of in the same words and things like that.
But if you do want them to write in the same style, you should at least educate them beforehand and provide them with a style guide and make your requests so concrete and so specific that they have little room for error. And so you set an expectation of what you want.
Exactly. Don't be like me and think that if you give somebody a keyword to write about, they're going to write the exact same 1,000 words that you would have written if you were doing the the article yourself.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get into that thinking, but I think over time you kind of realize that that's not how it works.
So here's the next con of outsourcing. Some things can't be outsourced. Keishi, what do you think about that? For example, if I were to think about it, I would say my own voice, my own branding, my own writing style can't be outsourced if I'm doing something for a personal blog. But what would you say can't be outsourced?
Yeah, I think if you're running a personal brand, like we were talking about the types of blogs last week, and if you're trying to build a brand around yourself, then there's definitely elements that are hard to outsource. Like if you're a YouTuber, that's kind of the person behind the camera, then you can't just one day disappear and have some other person show up, right? Because people expect you. But other than that, I think pretty much anything can be outsourced at one point or another. It's just a matter of time and money.
Yeah. What would you not outsource based on, for personal preference?
Personally, if I had the money, I'd love to outsource everything.
Really? Okay.
but I guess the one thing that I wouldn't outsource would be kind of the high level planning. So like if it, let's say if it's making sites, then deciding kind of which topic to start the site in.
Yeah.
But then kind of the the things that go under that. So like which keywords should we target, which articles should we write, and things like that. I think all of those can be fairly kind of standardized, and you can make procedures around them and things, and get people to follow your processes to get the result that you more or less want.
I definitely would not want to outsource my voice. Also, the direction of a blog or website, I think I would not want to outsource. However, I guess I would want to be involved, but I wouldn't mind taking a step back and having someone else suggest and push its course. But I would kind of want to have like a grand bird's eye view of what's going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's no doubt about that. Like I wouldn't just want to hand something over to somebody and like, hey, good luck with this.
Yeah,
But at this time, I would have no trouble with like hiring, let's say, let's give position name, whatever, like a content manager, somebody that goes out and does all the keyword research, and then like once every 2 weeks comes to me and says, "Oh, these are the 20 articles that we're going to be publishing over the next um, week or two. What do you think?" Then I'd have no problem doing that and just saying, "Yeah, I think it's good," or "I think it's bad," or "I think you should change this," or "You should probably look at this topic," or "Look at this keyword." Without having to necessarily be involved actively in like the keyword research
yeah.
process or anything like that.
All right. Are there any more cons to outsourcing?
Yeah, I think the last one to mention is that just like pretty much with everything, but it takes time and it doesn't pay off right away. In a way, it almost slows down your revenue initially or your profits initially. Because let's say you write 30 articles a month yourself, then maybe you build the site to $1,000 a month, and then you can start pocketing the $1,000 a month if you just do it all yourself. But if you decide to grow the site by outsourcing, then you're essentially paying money now so that you can so that you can earn more later. So kind of the return that you get immediately, or the profit that you get immediately, or the money that you get to keep in your pocket immediately is lower than it would be if you were kind of doing it yourself.
Whether that's a con or a pro, I guess might be debatable. I think it's just, I guess, yeah, it depends on a person. If someone wants results in money right now and they're not really fans of delaying gratification, then that would be a terrible con.
Yeah, yeah, I think it really depends on whoever is doing this situation. Because like let's say you're making barely enough money to survive in your day job, and you kind of want some extra free spending money, then I think $200 this month is better than $1,000 8 months down the road.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing this just to kind of grow your income beyond what it is now, but you're not necessarily struggling or you're not necessarily short on money or anything, then it's always better to invest in the future, right? Because
Yeah.
if you don't need the money now anyways, then why take 200 now if you can just wait a couple more months and get 800 or 1,000 or 2,000?
It sounds like a topic for personal financing. What do you do with your money right now? Do you just leave it sitting in your bank, or can you put it to better use?
Exactly, it's the exact same thing. Like, and I think one of the things is if you're doing this as business, then if you invest into content, then that's tax write off. So there's really little reason to just keep saving the money rather than reinvesting it back into the business. I think, as long as you
Yeah.
don't need the money right now for to pay for bills or to pay for whatever, to pay for a kid's school or something.
Yeah. Otherwise, you get a pretty high tax bill if your expenses are low.
Yeah, exactly. So just invest it.
Okay, so we just covered the pros and cons of outsourcing. And I guess the listener probably has received a bit of a hint as to when is the right time to start outsourcing. So, Kishi, what would you say? When is the right time?
Yeah, I think we pretty much kind of went over this question for the throughout the different points. But like I said, one, if there's somebody that's already making enough money to live off, but they don't have time, but they have some extra money, then you can start your side hustle easier if you just start outsourcing right away, right? Because you don't have to do the writing. So let's say you're like a lawyer or something and you make $15,000 a month, but you spend 15 hours a day at work, then it's probably easier to spend 2 hours a week just assigning articles to writers and spending like $200 or $300 or whatever on content than it is for you to actually sit down and spend another 10 hours writing the articles yourself.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you're somebody that's barely kind of managing to pay the bills, then you clearly shouldn't be investing more money into something that's in a sense a risk, right? So, or to some extent even a gamble, one could say. So in that case, I would just spend some more time and try to kind of bootstrap something and just build it out of my time. And then once the site starts making whatever $200, $300, $500, then you can take that and reinvest it back and either hire the writers in addition to what you're already doing or just kind of distance yourself out of the site and hire writers to do the content for you and you can kind of take over the content manager part. So I think it's the answer that everybody hates, but I think it depends.
I think an easy answer for most people would be wait a little until you start earning money that you can reinvest back in. Because I don't think a lot of people have a lot of money lying around on the side they could just throw into their side hustle. And if they can get it going on their own, if they start earning a bit, then you can take that and reinvest that. Although, again, the downside is that that would take maybe quite a bit of time.
Yeah, and I think there's another point to be made here, and I think you're making a great point in terms of pretty much everybody should try to do it themselves first and then reinvest. And I think the point here being that even if you're the $15,000 a month lawyer, let's say, the point being that if you don't do the things yourself and just start outsourcing them, then it's really hard for you to outsource because you don't know what it actually takes to do the work and you don't know what makes for good work and you don't know what the process should be. So if you actually do it yourself first and then kind of break it down step by step, looking at, okay, so when I write an article, I first write the outline, then I do the research, then I write it, and you kind of create a procedure, then it makes it so much easier to actually take that and throw it at somebody else compared to if you've never actually done it before and you just think it's done this way. So you kind of write it up quickly and throw it at someone.
All right. So the right time to start outsourcing probably depends upon you, but it's best for you to get an understanding of what the tasks are, what the process is like before you actually pass it over to someone else. That way you can clearly communicate it with them, you can set expectations, and you know what's involved and how to pay them. So, what should you outsource if one were to outsource?
That's a good question. I think it will really depend on kind of your natural set of skills. Because clearly, if you don't know anything about technology, then the first thing you outsource might be just paying somebody to just prepare your site, right, or something like that. But I think in terms of like regular outsourcing, I would say um, If you're a blog, then it's definitely writing content, unless it's like a
Mhm.
personal blog. And if you're trying to do YouTube or like podcast or something, then it would probably be more likely editing, since you're more
Yeah.
likely to be kind of the face or the person behind the brand.
Or
But
audio editing in our case,
yeah,
in case
audio
of
editing.
podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But I'd say in general, if we're talking about blogs, then definitely creating content, unless it's like a personal blog, of course.
And I guess most side hustles usually start off as sites or vlogs. So it's a bit harder to outsource. Wait, here's another question. How would you outsource in the physical world? I mean, because right now we're talking about side hustles that are pretty much done digitally, whether it's a blog or a vlog.
Yeah.
What if someone has a, say, they have, what was Gary Vee doing with the trading cards? Can you think of any physical businesses or side hustles? And how would you outsource there? I think there at that point, you just have to hire help straight up, hiring a cashier.
Yeah, but that's essentially outsourcing, right? That's kind of taking yourself out of the business. And I think in the physical world, it's that much more obvious because you actually have to be there physically to do the work, right? So like you can't be in multiple places at the same time. So I think let's take something like selling things on Amazon, which is kind of the mix of virtual and physical.
Yeah.
Like that's a great example of outsourcing, not necessarily to a person, but to a company. So you just send it to Amazon and they ship it for you. Or to take it a step back, let's say you're running a restaurant, and at first you probably just open the restaurant and you're the only person there, and you do all the cooking, you do all the dishwashing, you do all the cashier stuff, you do all the accounting. But then over time, you probably want to hire a bookkeeper, or you want to hire extra waiters and things like that to kind of be able to remove yourself from the business and be able to kind of work on the higher level in terms of just
Yeah.
figuring out what to do next as a business rather than kind of what the next little thing should be.
I think you mentioned earlier, but the things that you can't do, those should be outsourced. I'm just thinking back to my example of really big calendars, and we had no way of creating really big calendars. So that's where we had to hire out printing companies in China to create prototypes for us. So that was an example.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when it comes to physical products, if you're actually making physical products, then chances are 99.99% that you're actually starting with outsourcing, because it wouldn't make sense to create whatever to create widgets in your garage, right? It's better to just hire some company in China or wherever and order in bulk. You might be creating the prototypes, but once you get into kind of the production stage. So I think, yeah, in many ways, I think it's much easier for people to hire help to outsource things in the physical world than it's in the virtual world. Because in the physical world, you kind of know physically that you can't make 500 calendars by yourself, right?
Hmm.
But in the kind of virtual service world or whatever, it might be easy to go like, oh, it's just writing an article for 2 hours a day. I can do that, and I can do that 5 times a week, and that's 5 articles a month, 5 articles a week. So why would I outsource anything?
Yeah.
And it's also easier to kind of get hooked onto your own style. Versus if you want to make some physical product, then like once you have the CAD drawings or whatever, it can only be that one thing. But with the article, it's so subjective, I guess,
Yeah.
that you will have a hard time in the beginning kind of just trying to accept somebody else's work as good enough or as good.
Yeah. Accepting someone else's work is a place where a lot of outsourcing mistakes start happening. Actually, that's the next point that we want to talk about. What are some outsourcing mistakes you've made?
Yeah, where do I start? I think one of the biggest ones was definitely just like we were talking about before, just expecting much more than I was willing to pay, or than I was willing to actually guide through. And in many cases, I'd even say the second one was the more important one, which is I kind of just jumped in because I had this idea that, oh, I can just hire somebody for $25 and then I can just sit back and relax and they will do the work for me. I think you read the book E-Myth, right? The E-Myth.
Yeah, the E-Myth Revisited. I have it on my Kindle. I've made some strides into reading this book.
Okay, yeah. So there, I think that there's a thing that the guy calls delegation by abdication. I think that's what he called it, or something similar. And essentially, what he's talking about is that a lot of business owners just jump into outsourcing in a way where they just take something and throw it at somebody and then distance themselves from it, right? So let's say you're going to outsource bookkeeping. So what you do is you take all your receipts, you shove them in a shoebox, and you send it off to your accountant. And then at the end of the year, you're surprised that your taxes are high because you kind of just left the accountant to do whatever he wants without kind of communicating what you were expecting, and also without um, kind of receiving any feedback from him, and kind of having kind of working together with him rather than just throwing stuff at him, right?
Yeah. So this an example of a outsourcing mistake that you've made?
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's what I did essentially with writers in the beginning. Like I would just send a keyword and expect them to turn out the result that I was expecting, right? So let's say I would send them the best hand sanitizer as the keyword, right? And then I tell them I want 3,000 words written on this topic, and then I was expecting something in my mind, but whatever would come from the writers would never be the same thing that was on my mind
Yeah.
because I didn't provide any outline, I didn't provide any style guide, anything, right? So that's just an example of how, I guess, arrogant in a way, or how I don't know what the right word would be, but you just expect people to think the way that you do, but that's never the case, right? So I think so I think that's the biggest mistake that I've made, and luckily I think I've been getting better at that, and I've also been much more happier with the results I'm getting from outsourcing nowadays than, like, let's say, a year ago. So I think it's a learning process, but
Yeah. I have a similar mistake, but this was me providing way too much feedback after receiving the creative. Like this was from a copywriter. The mistake was that I just put down way too much feedback for him to the point where one would think, why didn't you say this in the first place, right? So this was a mistake of mine of not including everything that I wanted or didn't think far ahead enough to include everything that I wanted in the initial template. Someone would be tempted to take a look at the creative that they get back from a freelancer and be like, hold on, maybe you should change this, maybe you should change that, maybe let's change this. But if you never communicated these things from the start, or if these are not in your template, then I don't think it's a fair thing to do to a freelancer. And you shouldn't pile up extra feedback that's
exactly.
slightly differing from what you initially ordered, which is why nowadays I don't give feedback that as much at all, because if I didn't include it, then I can't expect it from them. And if I want that, I should have said that from the start.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the mindset shift that I had to go through, which is I had to go from expecting to get what I'm expecting to just expecting to get what's in the instructions, and just comparing the results not with my expectations but with my instructions. And like you said, if it's not in the instructions and it's not in the result either, then it's your fault. If it's if it's if it's in the instructions but it's not in the result, then it's the writer's fault, right? It makes it as simple as that, and there's no subjectivity about that. Like if you tell somebody include this section and that section is not there, then I think there's no problem in sending it back to the writer and saying, hey, follow the outline, you missed this section. Whereas you would just give the keyword and expect the section to just show up there, but it doesn't, then you just provided subpar instructions.
Definitely a mistake, guys, if you do outsource a piece of work to a freelancer and they give it back to you, and then you suddenly start having ideas. Wait, but what if we did this? What if we changed that? Don't do that. Change it by yourself.
And then fix your instructions so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I mean, like we always get ideas after the fact, when the writing starts coming in. When you start seeing the result, it's easier to see what should be rearranged. But the fact is, you can't unless they are a full time worker working for you and they're already on salary. It makes no sense to ask a freelancer, be like, "Hey, I just thought of this great idea that I didn't have before," which sometimes we all get. But you should really hold back and don't do it unless you're gonna pay them a bit more for that.
Yeah, exactly. What I nowadays do, I just write whenever I hire someone, I just say I'm gonna be comparing whatever you submit against these instructions, just so that they know that they can just submit any random thing, but at the same time they also know that I'm not gonna be asking for some crazy thing that never was in the instructions in the first place.
Yeah. Would you say that making a really solid bulletproof template would be a mistake? The reason I'm asking this is it's not a mistake if you're setting expectations and you give them exactly what to follow because it actually makes it easier for them.
Yeah.
But in the context of trying to do something new, I think I was thinking about this earlier because I try to make all my requests pretty bulletproof. At the same time, I end up not trying anything new. And I think content creators could have some better ideas to bring to the table if you want to try something more compelling than what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I think it really depends. I think in general, new is overrated. Like, why do something new if something is already working and you know it's working? And especially in a business where you're trying to, I think especially with like authority sites and things like that, where you're trying to get fairly cheap writing to earn your money, then I think it's better to just stay within some sort of format. Whereas if you kind of flip it on the other side and you're kind of running a magazine that people follow regularly rather than find on Google and things like that, then you definitely want to try new things. But also, chances are you're paying your writers like 5 times as much as you would pay your writers for an authority side.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on like the business model, right? Let's say the authority side here is McDonald's. Like, you want to hire somebody for $10 an hour, for $7 an hour, and you just want them to be able to follow the instructions um, to the last letter. Whereas if you're running like a chain of luxury French and Italian restaurants, then you want to invest in like really high-end chef that has creativity and that can just come up with new dishes on his own and stuff like that. So I think it really depends.
Any other mistakes that you can think of?
I think the other one would be in a way similar to the instructions, but this is kind of the step before, which is in the hiring process. One is just too vague job descriptions. Hey, I need an article about this topic. And then the other one being just kind of giving everybody a chance and not kind of screening hard enough.
Mm.
Because at some point, like for example, I've written for actual print magazines, right? And what they pay me is like 10 times as much as I'm willing to pay my writers, right? So I kind of wasn't screening too much in terms of who I gave a chance. Like, if somebody applied, I would just give them a test article, but they just ended up wasting so much of my time. So now I'm much more strict kind of in the hiring phase, and just I have a bunch of additional questions, and I kind of judge by those questions. And by now I can almost read the applications by now and kind of tell whether the person's worth giving a shot or not,
Hmm.
and actually kind of see whether it's going to work out in the long term or not. Like, if you have good questions in the applications, you can tell, one, how is the person's writing, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you get 20 mistakes, 20 grammar mistakes or whatever in an application for a writing job, then that's probably not your writer. Two, how humble is the person? Like, if somebody writes, if you ask them, like, are you a native English speaker, let's say, and somebody writes, no, but my English is decent, or I've studied in America or something, then it's great. Um, if somebody writes, I'm from whatever country, but my English is excellent and amazing and super wonderful, then they're probably full of themselves and the resulting product's going to be not so good, actually, right? And then um, three, you can kind of see their interest in the topic. So let's say you're hiring for writing for a fishing site, then even just asking something like, have you ever been fishing, or do you like fish, or something that's related to the topic, can give you at least some sense of whether the person's kind of interested in the topic, or whether he or she's good, or whether he or she's bad, and things like that. So I think a mistake that I made in the beginning is that the hiring process for me wasn't tight enough, and I would kind of just go throw out an ad and then kind of just take it from there, and it was all kind of by the seat of the pants. So how about you? Have you made any mistakes kind of in the hiring phase rather than in the execution phase?
From the hiring perspective, I think I've made mistakes in terms of hiring costly freelancers and hiring cheap freelancers because, like you said, writing is kind of subjective in some ways. But if you give them a tight enough template, they'll stick to it. But I've paid $100 for an article, and I've paid $30 for an article, and there were times where I would pay $100 and I wouldn't see a significant difference from a freelancer with a higher rate than one with a lower rate. I'm not sure if I would call that a mistake. I guess maybe an education. Well, yeah, because everyone has a right to charge what they think they're worth. But from the content perspective, the result perspective, I didn't see a big difference for it to be worth that much.
Yeah, would you say that in cases where it's like following a template, it might even be better to hire a cheaper person than an expensive person?
I guess, yeah. I think that
Yeah,
would be the case.
yeah, because listening to what you were just saying, I just started thinking. I never thought of it this way before, but I think it's just to go back to the McDonald's and French restaurant analogy. Like, if you're running a McDonald's, you probably don't want to hire a French, like, Michelin 3-star chef to run the restaurant, right? To run the McDonald's outlet, because he's just gonna go crazy, and like he's gonna think everything's bad, and he's gonna start putting like whatever chicken nuggets into hamburgers and just go creative. And that's not really what you want when you're when you're giving a template, right? So I just started thinking that actually hiring cheaper people for like a template work might to some extent be better, because sometimes I just find that they are more humble
Yeah.
and more willing to follow instructions rather than just kind of going crazy thinking they're doing great stuff, but actually they're doing bad work because they're not following the template that they've been given.
Yeah, the way I fixed it was I started including in all my job requests. My requests are language content related, so they attract translators. But the task in itself is content creation, not exactly translation. So I just made it quite clear that this is not a translation task. Hence, this is the going rate that I would like to ask for this.
That's interesting. So have you seen any kind of difference in results in terms of, I guess, people that applied for the jobs, or?
No, I think you just set expectations, and I mean, if you're asking straight up, or if you're stating straight up, this is what I want and this is what I'm willing to give for it,
Yeah.
then I think that's fair enough because people don't have to take the job.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, those were kind of our mistakes, I guess. Taking kind of a step further, do you think there is a right and a wrong way to outsource?
Yes, yes, definitely. We've covered it extensively just now, but poor communication, not setting expectations, not being detailed in what you want ahead of time, is definitely the wrong way to outsource.
Yeah, I agree with it. I take it a step further, and I'd say I'd almost put it out like almost like a matter of fact that I think there is a right and a wrong way to outsource, and I think I've done it both ways. And I think the wrong way is just, let's say you're writing articles and you keep writing articles for month months, and then you just decided, oh, I want to outsource this, and then you just jump to Upwork or Fiverr and write up your job post without necessarily thinking what your systems are and things like that, and then hiring somebody and just getting them on board. And I think the flip side of that is you kind of realize that you want to grow faster than you're able to do it yourself, or you realize that you don't want to write anymore, but you still want to keep growing the content. So you kind of take a step back and you just lay out the process that you're doing like step by step. Because the thing is, I think once you look at what you're doing, even if it's like publishing a simple blog, like you realize that there's a lot of steps that just follow each other that
Hmm.
in the end kind of make the result. And I think if you start there and you kind of break it down, and then you go from there, you look at like, oh, maybe this part I can outsource. So you create the instructions for it. Like literally, you just write down word by word what you would do step by
Yeah,
step. So like, take this, make a new file here, copy paste this there, like every single step. And then you could also make a video, and then you go hire, or then you make the job post. Because I think then it adds much more clarity to the job post itself, and and it also kind of shows you yourself where does this person where does this person fit within the whole system, and what's kind of the next part that you can outsource,
yeah,
or what is the part that you shouldn't outsource, and things like that. So I did kind of trying to figure out the process first and the hiring later, rather than just hiring right away. I would say is the right way. But
yeah.
again, I think it also depends on people. So
Yeah, that would be like hiring someone into a company, but not having a long term vision for them. And they're just like kind of sitting around and they're not sure where they're going or where they're heading because they're not getting an overall view or overall clear instructions.
exactly, I think this happens a lot with small businesses where they're like growing and they feel like they need to hire someone, but they also don't know how to keep them busy full time. Yet they
Yeah.
hire somebody full time, and then I think it just ends up in kind of an awkward situation.
Yeah. And it's frustrating for the employee because they don't know what they're expected of. They don't know if they're doing a good job or not. And they're kind of doubting themselves and they don't know how they fit in and what's the next step for them. And because the person that hired them didn't really think it through.
Exactly, and it's also frustrating for the person that hired them, probably because they feel like they're paying and not getting any results out of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's better to jump in with the system. And I think I'll post in the show notes a screenshot of like what my process is.
Any more thoughts on the right or wrong way to outsource?
Yeah, so I think there's not really much more to be talking about in terms of right and wrong ways, because at the end of the day, You just got to go out there and try to hire the first writer for yourself or the first virtual assistant or something, or somebody, and just figure it from there. Like, um, in the show notes, I will post the screenshot of what my content creation process looks like so that you can kind of see how I've broken it down into the different steps. But at the end of the day, the process is different for everyone. So you just got to look at what you're doing and how can you save yourself time. And the one thing that I guess should be noted here, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think people have to be ready to feel frustrated in the beginning, like they're wasting time just trying to teach this person to do something to actually see results down the road. At least that's been my experience.
Did you ever feel frustrated?
Yeah, because I felt like I make instructions and then the person doesn't follow them to the very end, and it can get really frustrating. But at the same time, the other person is just starting to learn it, right? So it's kind of natural that he or she makes mistakes. So I think for like long-term corporation, you just kind of got to push through in the beginning. And this was my case, especially with like the with virtual assistant, where I kind of assigned him a bunch of different tasks, which were kind of simple for me, but at the same time they were just new tasks for him, right? So it's obvious that he would make a mistake. But it can feel really frustrating in the beginning because you feel like what would take you to do 5 minutes takes you 2 hours because you have to make the instructions, you have to teach the person, and you have to fix his mistakes, right? But you just got to get through that because on the other side of that is you having to spend 0 minutes and somebody spending 5 minutes of their time to actually get the thing done for you.
There's a quote, or there's a metaphor, or what is it, a saying? I think that kind of relates to this. It's penny wise, pound foolish. You know, you're when you're being stingy about pennies, but you're missing out on the
Exactly.
big returns. So in the case of yeah, in the case of training up someone and you're being frustrated in the micro, you're being frustrated right now over the mistakes that they're making. You have to kind of think about the long term. Once they're up and running, once you're all, like, past this hump and this learning curve, you don't have to be involved in this at all. You can step out and forget about it. So this is just, it's a part of a, I guess, a growing pain.
Exactly. Let's just imagine that somebody's able to make whatever $20 an hour doing freelance work, right? And that someone can go to like onlinejobs.ph is a good place to hire virtual assistants from the Philippines who are really affordable. But let's say you go there and you hire somebody for $4 an hour, right? That means for 1 hour of his work, I mean that means for 1 hour of your work, you can get somebody else to work 5 hours for you, right? So it also means they can be 5 times less efficient, and you can still kind of be net zero. But chances are, if it's a simple task, at one point or another, the other person will be about as efficient as you. Like if it's copy pasting, let's say. Whereas even though in the
Mhm.
beginning they will be like 3 times slower. So I think if you just do the math for yourself and say, oh, I can be freelancing for $20 per hour, and while I do that freelance work in an hour, the virtual assistant can spend 5 hours publishing articles for me or making something easier for me. Once you look at it that way, I think
Yeah.
it's really, you can kind of really feel the potential of just taking something and having somebody else do it for you.
So you just mentioned the website. So what was it?
Onlinejobs.ph. So we can leave the link in the show notes.
The reason I ask is I think it kind of segues well into, for whoever is listening right now, they're probably wondering, all right, how do I get started with outsourcing? So what do our listeners need to do to get started?
Yeah, so I think like we were talking about a few minutes ago. First, just kind of look at what you're doing, look at what your side hustle is, or look at what your business is, and break it down step by step. And by step, I mean like open this tab in the browser, copy paste this part of the text, up to like about as detailed as it can get. And you can kind of start from the high level and then kind of go into the details. And then look at things that you are doing just because you have to do them because there's nobody else to do them, rather than because you're adding any sort of value. So
Hmm.
like let's say in the beginning, you probably want to be in charge of doing the keyword research, right? Let's say finding the articles that you want to write. But then you realize that writing the articles itself is just doing a bunch of research on the internet and kind of summarizing it into your own article. So you take that, and let's say now you want to outsource that. You create the procedure. So you write like your writing style guide. So like, do you want people to write in the first person, in the third person? Do you want people to be conversational in the tone, or do you want them to be professional in the tone? And things like that. And that goes back again to creating the bulletproof template, the bulletproof instructions. And once you have that, just make the job post, right? So I'm looking for a person that can do this, and I'm willing to pay this much. And also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the important things is probably setting expectations with the writer, because a lot of writers are looking for repeat jobs. So like, if you put up front that you're willing to outsource 2 articles a week or 2 articles a month or some sort of regular interval, then I think they're much more likely to apply. And then yeah, and then just go to a site like Upwork or Fiverr and post your job. So I think that's the place to start. Do you think I missed any step?
The next question, whoever is listening and they're new to this, they might be wondering how much will this cost me? Because anyone new, when it comes to throwing down money for something, they're kind of skeptical or cautious. So can you just run us through the fees or the cost of hiring a freelancer?
Yeah, I think the answer here would be, again, it depends on what you're after. So if you're trying to be like a science magazine, then it's clearly going to cost you more to outsource writers than if you're trying to be a site about cats. And also, like, if
That's a good sign.
if you're looking for a virtual assistant that will be able to do like a world class design, it's going to cost you more than if you're looking for a virtual assistant that will be able to do some copy pasting, some searching, some simple research, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
really, the spectrum is broad from like few dollars per hour to like $100 per hour, $200 per hour. But
How much do you pay for articles?
yeah, so to give you like a practical example, in my case, for my articles, I generally pay between $25 and $30 per thousand words,
Okay.
which means an article costs me anywhere between 30 and 60, 70, $80.
I usually go from between 30 and 50, depending, but for 900 words.
So if there's any writer listening to this, then apply for Yuri's jobs, not for mine.
I
but but
haven't posted anything. Yeah, go ahead.
but yeah, even at $25, there are still plenty of good people that are willing to do the work and that appreciate the money as
Yeah.
kind of their side income. And then again, for my virtual assistant, I pay him $4 per hour, which I find amazing, especially since like in Japan you could never do that, right? But if you hire somebody in the Philippines, then that's nice money for them, and they can provide a lot of value for you because they speak decent English and they're hard workers and they're really nice people.
Writing aside, I've also bought video content from like professional videographers. I think I paid up to $500, upwards of $500, and this was on Fiverr.com.
What was that for, like a
Ironically,
$500 for a clip, or?
it was I think it was like a 5-minute video or so. Basically, language content. It was basically someone learning how to write hiragana. Basically, they had like a printout, and I just wanted to have like a video for learners to see how they would go through each of the characters,
Yeah.
just for fun. It was an experiment. It was my first time, and I went through Fiverr.com, and I, despite Fiverr's title, I paid $500, but that's fine. It was like a learning experience.
And was the result good, or was it?
I It's hard. Like I guess I'm treating it as an experiment. I still have the video somewhere up on my site. I don't do YouTube monetization, so it's not exactly earning back.
I see.
I guess I just wanted to do it as an experiment and see what I would get.
Yeah, I think it's always worth doing experiments and just trying to invest in something new. And you've
Yeah.
been pushing me to invest in Pinterest, which I'm very reluctant to do, but maybe I should just just get my virtual assistant to start doing something.
So I guess I just wanted to offer that as an example, as to what someone can expect to pay a freelancer. Because in my case, it was like the guy did all the work, the video, the editing, the audio. So I guess the $500 price tag is justified.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, which is you get what you pay for, or however we formulated it. And like,
Yeah.
you can expect to hire a $4 per hour virtual assistant and have him make a Hollywood production quality video for you, right?
Yeah,
It all comes
that's
down to that.
unrealistic. Yeah.
Although you never know, there might be a rising talent, and you might be lucky, and you might be able to kind of extract the value out of him before he grows big. But On average, you can't expect that bit.
Yeah. All right.
And just one last point on this, in terms of expecting how much it will cost. I think in the beginning, rather than how much it will cost, you should just think about what's your budget, right? Like if your site is making $200 per month, you can take those 200 and reinvest them efficiently. If your site's making $1,000, you can reinvest them efficiently. If you have $5,000 that you want to invest into something and you want to try a side hustle, you can take those 5,000 and invest them efficiently. So it's just about matching your expectations and your budget.
That's a very good question because at one point I remember putting up a task request and a freelancer asked me, "What's your budget?" And that's something I've never thought about. And I'm pretty sure, I guarantee you, anyone that's starting their own side hustle, they don't exactly understand or know what a budget is or how to allocate, X towards freelance work or outsourcing. It's just one of these things. How do you come up with a baseline?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was starting the recent site that's growing well now, my plan was to take $5,000 and invest like 500 per month into content and have it go at like minus $500 for a year or something and then start making money. And then it started making more than I was spending. And I had a really hard time kind of figuring out, what do I do now? Like, do I outsource more or do I just take the money or do I invest in another side? And I think it can be a bit difficult to just try to kind of think of it in terms of, because it's very abstract, right? You're taking $500 which you can take today and you can take them to the store and you can get a new TV for yourself or something.
Yeah.
You're taking this $500, giving them to somebody else, taking a bunch of articles that will not give you any benefit for quite a while. So it can get really abstract and really hard to make decisions. And I think, um, at least in my case, there's a lot of doubt in some cases where I'm not sure if I should actually be spending the money this way or investing the money this way. How about you? Do you ever have any sort of doubt when you're paying somebody else for things like this? Like, should I rather go out and buy ice cream rather than give somebody else this money?
No, I don't have these kind of doubts. Oh, I thank you for bringing up my addiction to ice cream for the public to know. Just if in case anyone's ever interested, I'm very much into ice cream sandwiches. But I've not had that kind of doubt. But when you said that, budget becomes this abstract thing, I immediately thought about, imagine someone who just started their own blog and they're kind of listening to us and saying, yeah, outsourcing sounds like the right way to go, but they're not really making money at all. So the word budget is very abstract to them because it's like, I guess at one point it becomes, what is your personal preference or what is your cost? I don't know. For example, there's think about buying jeans.
Yeah,
In all of our heads, there's like a price that we would pay at maximum for jeans, but we would never go over it because they're just jeans. It makes no sense. Like
yeah,
you would not pay $1,000 for jeans because like who pays $1,000 for jeans? I'm pretty sure some people do, but in our minds, we kind of set these base limits or baselines
yeah,
for how much we're willing to pay. So I guess to a new side hustler, this is where it gets very abstract and they're not quite sure. So I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. I guess it becomes a personal preference and also looking around and seeing what everyone else charges.
yeah. And I think it also comes. I think that's one side is what's your cost, but I think it also comes down to like how much money do you expect to get out of it, right? So let's say for me, when I write a new article and I publish a new article, eventually I expect it to get at least like 500 page views a month, right? And let's say I get like $20 per thousand page views. So that means that every month the article will be making $10 sooner or later, right?
Yeah.
So if the article costs me $30 and then at some point I expect it to make $10 a month, it means in 3 months it pays off for itself once it starts making money. So that makes the decision much easier because like who's gonna pay you essentially 30% interest on your money
Yeah.
anywhere else, right? Yeah, but then let's say I had to invest like $300 to make the same $10. That would make it much more difficult. So I think it also comes down to expectations in terms of, the return on the investment.
Yeah. Earlier you asked, do I feel any fear of spending this money on this or ice cream? I think you kind of answered that quite well in this last part. Like you have a certain expectation of how much you're going to earn anyway. So to that extent, taking a hit on, hiring out a freelancer to write up an article, which may or may not make money, isn't, I guess, as big of a fear, because you know that what you stand to earn from it will cover the cost. Or even if it doesn't, how much you're earning already will cover the cost anyway, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's much easier to do outsourcing when actually the cash flow from whatever you're investing the money into is greater than the investment. Whereas you were just getting started and you just kind of want to pour money into something, then it's kind of psychologically much more difficult decision, I guess.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And yeah, and I think myself as well. Like I've been getting more comfortable with it as kind of time went, and now I have no problem spending like a few $100s on content a week or something, because I either get it back, or if I don't get it back, then I'll make it back in in some different way.
Yeah. So guys, if you want a few $100, Keishi is looking for content. Give him content today.
Yeah, you can definitely find my postings on Upwork generally. So if you happen to apply and I reply to you, then let me know that you listen to this show.
It's the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast, brought to you by Keishi and Yuri. So, guys, if you want the show notes for this episode, episode 7, go to sidehustlesandstuff.com/E7 to get all of the tips that we talked about, whether it's Keishi's templates for hiring out, posting up tasks, or just websites where you can hire freelancers such as Upwork, Fiverr. Be sure to visit the site, sidehustlesandstuff.com/E7. And if you want to start your own side hustle and you want a website, we definitely do recommend Bluehost. Basically, it's a hosting service where you buy a domain, you buy a website. Again, you press I want WordPress, and there you go. You have your very own blog where you're ready to start pumping out content, or you can get a freelancer to create content for you that you can pump out under your own name. So visit sidehustlesandstuff.com/hosting. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Keishi, do we want to leave them with any more insights, or should we have a banter section?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it pretty well. I mean, at the end of the day, once you feel like you need to start outsourcing, you just go out there and try it and figure out your own way. And maybe you remember that you listened to this podcast and come back to this and kind of refresh the tips in your mind. But yeah, if you want to scale your side hustle, or if you want to grow it, then chances are at one point or another you will have to do this.
Yeah, I think it is the fastest way to scale a side hustle if you're not willing to wait years and years.
Other than investing in Bitcoin, but we're no certified financial advisors. So.
We're not certified financial advisors. We're not accountants. We're not lawyers. Please consult your own financial advisor. Please consult your accountant. Please consult your own lawyer before proceeding with any action that you've heard today about Bitcoin.
Sounds good. We should be covered.
For outsourcing, what are you outsourcing right now?
So I'm just trying to get some new writers on board, and I've probably got like a dozen articles in production right now for both one of the sites that I'm actively growing right now, and the site that I was talking in the bonus episode that we did about our goals and progress. So for the new site, so yeah, so I have 9 articles for the site that I'm building right now, and another 3 articles for the site that I'm planning to launch in exactly a month from today, actually. So
Oh, wow. By the way, have you ever thought about outsourcing other kinds of content outside of articles, like audio or video? Or maybe you wanted a programmer to build some app or widget for you?
yeah, I was actually thinking of creating. So with the ad network that I do, it's called Mediavine. But you can do video ads, and those apparently earn pretty well. And you can just create videos based on the articles that you have. So it's like a video with text and some photos. Like you see a lot of them on Facebook and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
so I was thinking of trying to get my virtual assistant to create a bunch of those, because actually when he applied for my job, he also sent me some samples of videos like that he's done before, and it seems like he might be capable of delivering decent work. So that would be great.
What about music or audio?
No, I think for audio, the next thing we gotta outsource is the freaking editing of this podcast.
Whoever's listening, if you like editing audio, if you like listening to bloopers, if you want instant access to hilarious content that'll make you fall off your seat, let us know.
Yeah, I think the podcast is a great example for outsourcing, because recording this is quite a lot of fun, but then the editing that follows it it's a lot of work, and you just gotta listen to it, and it takes like 5 minutes for every minute.
I think this is a great example of things that should be outsourced. Like eventually, whoever's listening right now, when you start your own stuff and you're doing work and you'd be like, you know what, I really don't like doing this. I think that's an example of like when you should start outsourcing.
Yeah, but that's a good point too. Actually, probably just just having to do the work yourself first and just appreciating how difficult it is will probably make you appreciate whoever your video or audio editor is and whatever the work he's doing is. So you should probably just do it yourself first, because we're not making any money out of this podcast yet, but we could probably afford to like outsource editing like every other episode or maybe even every episode. But at this point, we just kind of push through it and
Yeah.
and suffer.
Suffering allows you to understand other people.
Yeah, and it's a good routine. Every other week, you just have to sit there for a couple hours and
I
listen to
think
yourself blab on and on.
but on the flip side, I think when it comes to outsourcing versus not outsourcing, yeah, sometimes your time is better spent, but sometimes I like more menial, hardworking, hands-on jobs because they remind you of like it's always a practice of patience and putting work in. Otherwise, this is just from my personal preference. It's considered that we should optimize our time. We should give away certain tasks that can be done by someone else. But I think it's also a balance because if I give away all my tasks that can be done by someone else, and if my work is reduced 100% to thinking and planning, I don't want to be sitting in my head all day, is my point. I need a break. I need something else to do. And I think that provides valuable variety, even if it's hard.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I, I love menial tasks because, like, let's say at the end of every month, I do my own bookkeeping or having to fill out a spreadsheet or something. I love it because there's always an end to
Yeah.
it, right? If I finish my accounting, it's a really good feeling because I've just finished like a bunch of work that had its end and it's done. My accounting for
Yeah.
this year is done, right? Whereas with like more of the creative planning work, it's never done. It's like you find 10 keywords to write articles about that you outsource to your writers, and then it's time to then it's time to find another 10. Like
Yeah.
there's no end to it, right? It just but it's still a lot of fun to think about those things and to plan them. And
But it's a balance.
but I think
You need balance.
yeah, it's a balance. I think it also comes back to like how do you define what a menial task is? Like I think
Yeah.
I'd much rather outsource the menial tasks and then have like more time to read books. And that kind of provides the same sense of accomplishment when you finish a book and you finish a book and you finish a book and it's done, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's about kind of finding. I don't know about you, but like probably the biggest reason I do all this stuff is just to essentially be able to do whatever I want with my time.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might be doing your accounting. Sometimes that might be vacuuming your floors. Sometimes it might be just copy pasting leads into a spreadsheet or something. Like menial work feels good sometimes, but I think when it
Yeah.
starts to take up too much of your time, then it's probably better to step back
Uh,
and let somebody else handle part of it.
I guess that's why I say balance. There's also an anecdote that I've heard some time back, and it's for some reason it's been like ringing true in my head. And the anecdote goes as like there's a construction worker of some sort meets up with a businessman, and they get into a conversation, and the businessman tells him, "You have to work with your hands outside all day, whereas I get to sit in a nice, comfy office
Yeah.
and work with my brain." And to which the construction worker replies, or maybe it was someone else, but they reply, yeah, I get to work with my hands all day, but when my job is done, I get to go home. When you're working with your brain, you have no off time. Like you don't shut off. Like at least I get to keep my mind. You don't get to keep yours.
Yeah, I think that's a very good anecdote, and I think that's kind of the curse of the entrepreneur. It's like the nice thing about the 9 to 5 job, not that I ever had one, but I think it's the nice thing about it is that you go to your job, you get your work done, you go home, you switch on the TV, and you don't have to think about anything. Whereas I think if you're doing your own projects or if you're like freelancer or looking for new clients, like the job is never done. Like you can always send one more email, you can always check your stats once again, you can always write one more extra article, and like it's kind of the quest of just building the thing that by its own nature is never ending. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think the menial tasks are
But for someone who wants balance, it's probably not the best thing.
probably not. Yeah.
Guys, if you want to check out our conversation on balance, I think we covered it in an earlier podcast. I guess the 6 reasons why side hustles are not for everyone.
Yeah, I think we're talking about that there. And again, I think over time there's like a fork in the road where you either become too obsessed with the business and that becomes your life, versus where you design your business to kind of let you live the life that you want, and hopefully you kind of turn the latter way.
Yeah. So I guess it's ultimately based on personal preference and what people think they want right now. But those tend to change over time. You know, you get older, you have a family, you start wanting to spend more time with your family.
Yeah, and I think there will be people that will tell you that you got to work like 16 hours a day to build something, but I think that's um, to keep it kids friendly. I think that's a lie.
Yeah, it's the hustle, hustle, hustle mentality. No rest, push, 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 work, work, work.
Yeah, I was listening actually to a podcast the other day, and the guys were saying something interesting, which is I think the kind of the hustle culture, it just can create a lot of problems because you have somebody that's trying to start a business and what they're doing is not working, but they also kind of tell themselves, oh, maybe if I hustle more, it's going to work. And they just spend working more and more and more time on something that clearly will never work, no matter how much work you put into it.
That is a good topic actually for like a separate episode because I have experience there. I think I told you about it before.
Yeah, we should talk about hustle versus non-hustle and how much to work and things like that. I think it's an interesting topic to talk about.
You're trying to squeeze water out of a rock.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great analogy. And yeah, I think my view on this topic has changed like 180 degrees over the last few years too, probably. So should be an interesting discussion.
All right. So until then, guys, again, this has been the Side Hustles and Stuff podcast with Yuri and Keishi. Thank you for listening in.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
And wherever you're listening, if you like this, please leave us a review on your podcast provider, whether Apple or Google. If you see this on Facebook somewhere, leave a comment. We're always happy to hear from you. Thank you again.